The Pan Celtic Race. What a brutal, brutal race.
Trendy.
I've just come back and I thought, whilst my legs are still recovering and I've got my bike behind me, I've just done a bike setup and all my kit review, so I'll give a link up here somewhere. Yeah, I thought I'd just do a little sit down video and just talk about my experiences at the race. It was the first race I've ever done of an ultra endurance kind of distance, and yeah, just so much to talk about and share really. I had planned on taking my GoPro along, and well, in fact I did take my GoPro along, but I sort of went into the race not planning on racing it, just planning on riding it really. I'll go into a bit more detail later, but yeah, anyway, I thought I'd do a lot more, well yeah, not relaxed, but just a bit of a slower pace really, and yeah, soon got carried away with all the racing aspect, and then so it meant that I took my GoPro out like for 5 minutes at the very start of the race, and then didn't touch it for the rest of the whole event. So yeah, I've got a few pictures which I sort of like put throughout the video, but otherwise I just thought I'd just sit down and just do a little face-to-face video really about everything that happened. Oh, it's quite sunny now. So for those of you who don't know, the Pan Celtic Race is an ultra endurance bikepacking event. It's all self-supported, which means you have to do everything that, you have to carry everything yourself, and you can only take advantage of things that are available to everyone. So you can't have a support van, or you can't have family or friends waiting for you at certain checkpoints or certain locations, but you can rely on the kindness of strangers, and you can you can go into shops, you can go into bike shops and all those things that anyone else in the race can access, just so it's sort of a level playing field. It's not so much about how much you can spend on having a whole team around you. It's just riding it as if it's just riding it as you would any other bikepacking ride really, just that there's kind of racing aspect to it as well. The Pan Celtic Racing Series is in its third year, and it goes around the different Celtic nations. So I think the first year it started in Scotland and went down into Ireland, finished in Wales. The second year was delayed because of COVID, and then but then it went from Cornwall up to Wales, and then this is the third edition, which started in South Wales, just about 5 kilometres outside of St David's, and then there was a short neutralised section to Pembroke, and then from here there was a 4-hour ferry journey to Rosslare on the south-east coast of Ireland. The route then went along the south coast of Ireland through Cork before going up through the west coast, which included areas like the Ring of Kerry, Dingle and around Galway, and then from here it briefly crossed the border into Northern Ireland before heading back to Dublin, where there was another ferry journey crossing back to Holyhead with the final 80 kilometre stretch to the finish in Llandudno and the Great Orme. As I said, this is the first ultra endurance race that I'd done. I'd done like road racing about 6 years ago, but nothing really recently. More recently I've been doing sort of bikepacking events, as you've probably seen from my YouTube channel, sort of like multi-day trips, either on-road, off-road, but much more sort of casual and not really racing. So on to the event. Registration was on the Saturday. I arrived quite early just because I knew there's so many people using the trains, and there's quite a lot of like just waiting around, and sort of you could tell the anticipation was growing. There were about just over 200 people doing the event, and so it was great, just like meeting people, chatting to people, and lots of other people. It was their first event as well, and yeah, it was just great seeing seeing everyone's kit, seeing everyone's bikes, but it was sort of like all this time I was getting a little bit more nervous, and I just couldn't wait just to start riding. And on the Sunday, again, it was still a lot of waiting around, because then we left. There was a neutralised section from the campsite to Pembroke Docks, where we're getting the ferry, and then obviously there's a 4-hour ferry journey. So it was only about 7 o'clock in the evening that we arrived into Ireland, and then as soon as the race started, it felt amazing to be on the bike and just be racing, and and it was probably the first 20 kilometres was just quite busy, because everyone was sort of jostling for position. Everyone had been sat down for 2 days, and everyone, you could tell everyone was so pleased to get off the ferry and start racing. But yeah, and I had planned before that I probably would sleep a few hours that first night, but I soon realised that not many other people were going to sleep, so I was I just have to plough on through the night. And after a few hours, then the road started getting a bit quieter. Everyone sort of then got into their rhythm and found their position. Yeah, the first night was actually pretty flat. There was a nice tailwind, and it's about a 40 kilometre section just on the cycle path that just flew along that. There wasn't anyone else on it, and it was just nice and flat. And it was probably about 6 hours into the race when I first looked at the tracking map, and saw that I was about 6th or 7th position, and I was like, oh right, that's better than I thought. I didn't think I'd be up at that kind of end of the race. So yeah, that kind of gave me motivation to carry on through the night. And some people did stop, but it was that sort of gave me that motivation to keep on going, keep on pushing along, and the legs felt fine, and because I'd slept a bit on the ferry, I didn't feel like I needed to sleep. So yeah, I kept on riding, and it was probably during the day, maybe about midday, when I had about a 10-minute nap just on the side of the road, I started feeling the tiredness, slowly starting to affect me. So I had about a 10-minute nap on the side of the road, which it doesn't sound that much, but actually does. You just fall asleep so quickly, and it does wonders really. And then there's the first checkpoint up Mount Gabriel, which is really, really killer of a climb, and the weather was starting to get quite warm then as well. So yeah, I think I arrived into checkpoint 1 in 4th place after Paul, Alex, and Dave, and I met Dave for the first time at that checkpoint, which is quite a nice place. Even though everyone's racing, everyone's still really friendly, and everyone has time for a chat. And so that's a really nice part of the race. That even though it is, some people are racing, some people are just doing it for their own enjoyment, but there's still that kind of community spirit about the event. After the sort of the flat section overnight, it did start getting a bit hilly during the day, and just the sort of overall tiredness started to creep in. And the 3 riders in front of me carried on riding much later into the night, whereas I was, about 9:30 p.m. I decided to stop just on the side of the road and get a few hours sleep, just because I felt like I wasn't really riding that fast anymore. So, there's no point pushing too much, especially that, on the first day of the race, without stopping. So, I stopped at 9:30, and I think that was a good decision, because I was just getting really slow. So, it's just not efficient anymore. So I stopped there for about 3 hours, and called it a night. So on the second day, I started riding again about 1 o'clock in the morning, and I could see on the tracking map that a lot of people had overtaken me during the night, just because they'd carried on riding longer. So then I slowly started clawing my way back, and then by about 5 o'clock I think I'd nearly caught up with Paul. I'd overtaken Dave, and I met Alex on the road. He was just waking up from his bivvy in the field, I think. So it was, even though I'd had an early night, I managed to claw some time back during the morning. And it was a pretty hilly morning. Started going over some of the mountain passes, sort of the Gap of Dunlow, and then on towards the Ring of Kerry. And about 5 o'clock in the morning, when I was catching up with Alex, I just felt so tired. I'd been riding for about 5 hours by that point, and hadn't seen anyone. But as soon as I did see someone, it just gave me that shot of energy. It was like I had another 5 hours sleep. It was just incredible how much that sort of human interaction, just how much energy it gave me. Carried on riding during the day. I was always in that sort of third or fourth position, and then got to Dingle, where was the second checkpoint. There was a hostel there which the organisers had booked out, so that gave an opportunity to sort of rest and sleep and recharge any devices. But I think I was getting a little bit more competitive at that point, and I'd been chasing Alex all day, who was in second position, and I'd finally caught him, and he stopped at the checkpoint. So I thought I'd better carry on and push on through to get into that second position. And also there was a short ferry journey the next day at the Tarbert ferry crossing, which was only about half an hour crossing on the ferry, but it only ran between 7:30 in the morning and 9 o'clock at night. So I knew that I wanted to be there at the first ferry at 7:30 in the morning. So that was also another reason why I decided to ride on during the night, to try and get as close as I could to the ferry, just so that the next morning I'd have fresher legs. It didn't quite go to plan, because I was just, by that point, I've been riding for over 24 hours, and riding in the dark can be pretty lonely. And even though I had a nice tailwind, it was just, I just started like hallucinating and started seeing faces in the road, and I was riding with one other person for a little bit, but soon I was then on my own again. And it got about 4:30 when I was about an hour's ride away from the ferry, where I was going to get the ferry in the morning, and I just knew it was just had to stop. I didn't really feel safe riding anymore. So I bivvied in a field for, it was only about an hour and a half maybe, until about 6:30, and then started cycling again to get to the ferry, which was the first point I met Paul Wainwright, who was always leading the race really, and then so it was, and it was really inspiring meeting him, and it was great to see after we'd come off the ferry. It was just seeing how organised he was. I think we were probably riding a similar speed on the bike, but it was off the bike he was just really organised. He had everything planned out. As soon as we left the ferry, he'd put all his sun cream on, he'd eaten, everything was just in position, ready to go. And after not having a very good night's sleep, it felt quite a slow day, the day 3. It was quite hilly, and we had a bit of a headwind. So all that sort of combined with the lack of sleep, I did have a couple of like 10 or 20 minute power naps during the day, just to sort of boost up my energy levels. And by the end of the day, we passed at Galway, and unfortunately Alex had to stop. He had some, he felt lightheaded, so I stayed in second position that night, and again had it wasn't an early night's sleep, but I stopped about 12 o'clock at night, just to and I planned to have about three hours that night, just to try and have a bit of a better night's sleep, because I felt like I hadn't really slept that much since the start of the race, and I just a lack of sleep's never good. So I was aiming for about 3 or 3.5 hours that night, which was, I think that was a good decision. So day 4, by this point we'd passed Galway, and we were still on the west coast, but sort of getting towards the northern end of the route. There was a pretty strong headwind the first morning, but I knew that as we would then start heading east and south, that would hopefully turn into a tailwind. And this was the first day when I really started thinking about the ferry at Dublin. There are only 2 ferries per day, one at 8 o'clock in the morning, one at 8 o'clock in the evening. And so that was the first point I really started calculating how fast I had to go, how much distance I had to cover. And this was on about Wednesday morning, and I think it was about 800 kilometres to Dublin. So I was aiming for the 8 p.m. ferry on the Friday evening. So it was about 36, 37 hours that I had, which I calculated that if I only stopped for about an hour and a half for sleep, and then try and minimise stops the rest of the time, I'd sort of calculate that it'd be a challenge, but it would be potentially possible. So with that in mind, I started really pushing that day, and I felt like I got a good good few miles under my legs. There were a couple of challenging climbs, probably one of the hardest climbs of the whole event, on a Kill Island, I think it's called, which is about 3 kilometres at 12%. And that was, that definitely took some energy out of my legs. By that point, Paul was about 4 hours ahead, who was in first position. I was in second position, and then Dave was in third position, about 4 hours behind. And it was one of those things that I hadn't really expected to be in that position. But that kind of gave me more motivation, just because I was like, okay, I'm here now, I might as well make the most of this situation. I just pushed on as much as I could that day. And then in the evening, it was getting a bit rainy and a bit misty. And so about 11 or 12 o'clock, I decided to have a nap. I planned for about an hour's nap, or an hour and a half. Found a field entrance and just set up my bivvy there. Because when you're so tired, you can literally just sleep anywhere, which is great. And you get to sleep so quickly, just like 30 seconds and you're just asleep, which is, great. The 5th day was the first time I made a mistake, and this was the Friday, and I'd planned to have about, a 90-minute sleep, and then start again at 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, and ride through the morning and try and get to the ferry at 8 o'clock. I think at this point I had about 440 kilometres, so I did really have to push on. I thought it would be possible, but I woke up, meaning to wake up about like 1 o'clock or 2 o'clock, and I woke up and I heard this van pass me, this lorry pass me, and I woke up and I suddenly like shot out of bed, and just had this like it felt like I was waking up from a nightmare. And I remember trying to find my phone, and it was just completely out of battery. And I had 2 battery packs, and I calculated how much battery I needed to get through the event, and I thought I had enough. But one of the battery packs was quite an old one, and even though it had quite a big capacity, it just lost the charge so quickly. And I had no battery on my phone, and I was obviously using that to wake up, use it as an alarm, and it was just like the worst feeling ever. Like, I think I'd slept for 4 or 5 hours instead of 1 or an hour and a half, and it was literally just like I had the worst feeling, just like all that effort I'd put into getting to that position, being second in the race, especially not even aiming to be in that position at all. It just felt like it was all for nothing, and it was the first time I'd cried in about in a few years. I think I did calculate when I woke up if it would still be possible to reach the ferry, and I think I'd have to ride an average of 26 kilometres an hour, which doesn't sound that much. Like a normal road ride, you might be able to do that, but there were a few hills, and had all the luggage on my bike, and the sort of tiredness, and still riding 440 kilometres at 26 kilometres an hour is still a pretty decent pace. And so the first few hours I did try and do that, and I was on target, even with a couple of stops. But as soon as the hills started, there were about 2 or 3 like decent sized hills. The hills just completely took out the speed, and there was just no way of me getting that ferry, which was frustrating because I knew that Paul was going to be on that ferry. It was one of those things that I think in my first race I knew something would happen. I was sort of expecting something to go wrong. It was just a shame that it was at that point that I ran out of battery and stuff. But anyway, there was nothing I could do apart from just keep on riding. So that day I took it quite. After I realised I wouldn't be able to get that ferry, I took it quite chilled. I stopped at a few shops and I asked to charge up my phone there. Had an ice cream and just had a nice ride into Dublin. I think I arrived in Dublin about 11:30, 12 at night, and then the next ferry we were allowed to take was at 8 o'clock the following morning. So I had about 8 hours just to relax in Dublin. I wasn't really too sure where to sleep. I was trying to think of where I could bivvy, but in the end I went to the ferry terminal and just slept in the service station. And all this time I was sort of watching the map, seeing where all the other riders were. About three riders, Stephen, Dave and Alex, who all doing the long route, who I thought might get the ferry, might not. So it was a bit of a nervous wait to see who was going to get on the ferry, because after the ferry there was only 80 kilometres stretch to the finish line. So it was obviously quite a short section after the whole race around Ireland. And yeah, I think Alex had some mechanical issues, so it was only Dave and Stephen who arrived. I think they only arrived an hour before the ferry, so they're about 8 hours behind me, I think. So yeah, so obviously I'd had 8 hours to rest and recover in Dublin, even though it was just in a service station. I didn't really get that much sleep, but I still had fresh legs, whereas they'd been riding all morning. So that was my only hope. And Dave had a very different style of racing to me. Dave had much less luggage, and he was just B&Bing it with the whole route and staying at hotels and B&Bs, whereas I was obviously had a lot more sleeping kit and just heavier bike generally. So it was a little bit, I thought that he'd have the edge on the last 80 kilometres. Obviously he had lighter bike than I had, fresher legs. So on the ferry it was a bit of a nervous wait to see, just getting so close to the finish line. It was all coming down to a sprint. But at the same time, it was great to meet Dave and great to meet Steve. Great to meet everyone else. And even though it is a race, it's still so much like community about the race, and it's such a friendly atmosphere. So we had about 4-hour ferry journey to Holyhead, and then it was 80 kilometres to the finish line in Llandudno. Me and Dave were riding quite a similar pace for most of that the final stretch, and the final challenge was going up the Great Orme, which is a little climb, and so that was really where the that was going to decide who came second in the race. By this point, Paul had obviously finished about 12 hours earlier. So this was the race for the second place, so we got to the Great Orme, which was very close to the finish line, but just this one climb to get over. And he attacked on the first. There's sort of there's two main sections of the climb. It goes up quite steeply, then it goes down a little bit. Then there's a second longer kick of the climb. And Dave he attacked on the first climb, and then on the second climb, I managed to claw it back, and we were sort of neck and neck. And I overtook him a little bit by just like a metre or so, and then he overtook me another, few metres. And it was just for a while, it was just this. We were just so close. It was just neck and neck. And obviously there's no drafting allowed, so you have to be quite careful of trying not to be seen as drafting. And we got to the top, and we were literally at the very top. We were literally just the same, just next to each other. There was no difference between us, and it was just quite a funny, bizarre situation. After riding 2,400 kilometres around Ireland, that we're in this position where we're just neck and neck on the final few kilometres. And then there was a final descent into Llandudno where the finish line was, but it was getting to a position where there was other cars, there were traffic lights, and just other pedestrians on the roads and things. So we just decided to call it a truce and come in joint second and finish the race together, which was just a great way of finishing the event. And made a friendship with Dave, and something that I'll never forget, and he probably won't either. So I think after that, and after all of my disappointment of not waking up and not getting that initial ferry, it was definitely a nice way to finish. And the main thing about the event was just how friendly everyone was, just so much support, and just it's great just to meet so many like-minded people. I just completely loved the event, and I just since coming back I've just been like googling other similar events and just thinking of other challenges and things. It's just a great atmosphere, and I definitely recommend anyone trying it if they want to dip their toes into ultra endurance riding and racing. There's a longer route which I did, and there's also a shorter route, which is great if it's the first time you're doing it, a little bit unsure how you're going to cope with it. Also, if you just got work commitments or family commitments and can't take off that much time, you can just do the shorter event, and it's easy to fit in around other commitments as well. So yeah, hopefully you enjoyed this sort of like breakdown of the race and how I found it. I definitely want to do more events. So let me know if you ever know of any ultra endurance bike races or anything, and then do let me know, because I can't wait to do my next one now. Just so great. So yeah, hope you enjoyed the video, and make sure you check out my kit video. I did a sort of full overview of everything I took and the bike I took and everything, which is behind me, but I'll leave a link to that below. And yeah, finally, make sure you like and subscribe to my channel, and see you on the road. Happy adventuring.